It is the Practical Prayer Podcast pre-show on New Thought Media Network. Bill, that's Carol. We're chatting it up again to talk about practical prayer, and this is turning fun. This is actually episode number 115, and Carol kind of acknowledged before we got onto the pre-show that she's getting bored with the questions that she thinks of, and so she changes her mind about what the topic is going to be sometime between the time that we get on before we roll the program and the time that this one starts, and possibly again before we start recording the podcast.
Yes, but you know what that says? It's like somehow, not even somehow, we both know that this thing is spirit-led and just flow with it.
Yeah. And you're rocking with your inner kid in a candy store, because there's so many things to talk about. You don't want to box yourself in by I'm going to have a marshmallow again.
Yeah.
Like, no, there's lots of stuff, lots of possibilities.
And I am such a serious person. You know, I mean, I get goofy sometimes, but for the most part, I'm really serious, especially when it comes to learning and work and stuff like that. And it really takes me out sometime when we're talking and I'm all ready to be serious about something and something else comes up and I'm thinking, I'd rather switch to that. Well, you're not supposed to switch, because you're supposed to stay on course. You decided this is what you had to do. So, yeah, I feel like I'm growing here.
Okay.
I'm learning the flow and all that business.
Oh, nice. Okay, well, we still don't need you to come up with a topic for the show yet, because we still got a minute. And I'm going to remind the folks who are on who are watching online on the network, on TV, that if you have a question or a comment, you can put it into the comments on YouTube or Facebook, and you also can go to the website at bethelight.com, be-the-light.com, and let's see, I have a little banner that says that. There it is. Look at that. bethelight.com. You can go in there and there's a button where you can make a comment or ask a question or some of that stuff, and we would be happy to I was going to say answer it. We won't answer it. We'll consider it. We'll talk and think about it. We might answer it.
Probably.
Yeah, we probably will. And also, if there's a prayer request that you have, something that you'd like us to include in the prayer that we close every episode with, or a particular prayer for you, then by all means, put that in there so we can have an interactive sort of experience. Have you thought about the topic yet?
Yeah.
What are we going to talk about?
I in a certain area turned out to be exactly what I did not want to be. I'm like, how the heck did that happen? So I kind of know how it happened, but it's still yet unbelievable.
Okay.
So, I don't know. You need to talk? You need more?
No, that's the title, What I Didn't Want.
Yeah. Yeah, it came out in a Starbucks conversation, actually.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
You were at a Starbucks with somebody and...
Yeah.
Okay.
And we were talking, and I'm like, listen to this. I can't say what I said then. But...
Well, you can, you just don't want to.
No, I don't want to. But I'll say it this way. Listen at this shiggity. Yeah. Well, all right. I've got a lot of things to think about there. So let's go ahead and start the episode of the podcast, and we'll record the Practical Prayer Podcast in 3 segments, and then we'll do some more Q&A and chat if anybody is sticking around and wants to do that. Here we go. Let's jump in.
A practical prayer is a prayer that works.
These discussions between Reverend Bill Marchiony and Carol Lawrence dive into the details of how it works and how to work it.
Reverend Bill is a New Thought minister and the author of Practical Prayer for Real Results.
Your new life begins with a new thought.
Carol Lawrence is on a spiritual quest, finding the New Thought teaching after decades on the pulpit in 3 different traditional denominations.
I've got some questions.
Together, they're exploring the philosophy and activities that come together from many of the world's religions to create the practical spirituality that is New Thought.
Welcome to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marchiony, and I am excited about this one.
You have queued up another exciting topic about what you didn't want. And why is it that you keep on getting exactly what you didn't want, or you get to be exactly what you didn't want to be?
Yeah, like I'm not sure. Yeah, listen, I started to say I'm not sure if it's a keep on getting, but after this conversation happened in Starbucks, right? I think all kinds of deep stuff happened in Starbucks.
Okay.
And so I'm talking, and it just like hit me, like really came together. You are being exactly what you did not want to be. What? And then, we talked about it, and the realization, it was shocking. And then I thought, now here's my question, okay? If I can figure out how to undo this, which probably is not that big a deal, how many other places am I that way in my life? And now that made me start to think. On the drive home, I'm thinking, where else is this showing up? Maybe that's the thing getting in my way. I'm too much of what I don't want to be. But anyway.
Yeah, and there are a couple of different ways to look at that. There's the stuff where we absolutely decided in our earlier life, whether it was when we were young or when we became adults, or at some point we said, I never want to do that. That is what I don't want to do. And a lot of times it's, I don't want to be like mom, or I don't want to do what dad did, or, there's something else. And we point to that and say, that's not for me. And in those circumstances, if we don't identify what we want to be instead, then the only input that we have given that infinite creative power is what we don't want. If we only have a role model of a dysfunctional parent, then how do we know when we've got something better? Everything is getting measured against dysfunctional parent.
Yeah. That is so true, because while you were talking, I'm tracking it, from really from my earliest memory of saying, I don't want to be this. Mm-hmm. And the first thing I recognize is that I didn't replace it with what I do want to be instead.
Yep.
Like, I don't want to have this attitude which drives this particular behavior, but I didn't replace it. And I didn't know, I guess I just wasn't thinking or whatever. And I actually kind of nurtured it as a good thing. And it's a good thing in its place, maybe not. I think I better take that back. Yeah.
Okay.
Probably not such a good thing.
It has served a purpose.
There's a huge amount of, you don't know everything, right? So places of ignorance, and I mean that in a cool way. You don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So you just like going with the flow of what seems cool to you. And then you look and say, well, I don't want that. But here's the thing that you said was significant. I did not replace it.
Right.
I just said, I don't want to do that. And that.
Yeah. Well, there's a practical aspect to that. And then there is the spiritual context of it. And the practical aspect is when we're doing a practical prayer, the first thing we want to do, as we have identified the circumstance in our life that we want to dispense with, is we have to pivot. We have to understand what the pivot is. And that's the first step in the prayer, is identifying the purpose of the prayer, which is, okay, here's what's been going on for me. This is what I want to have be going on instead. And it's crucial to turn from what has been to what it is that we're inviting in, because, and here's the spiritual part of it, the universe don't know no. Mm-hmm. I want to have no loneliness in my life. All we're talking about is loneliness. So it's on a scale of lonely to more lonely, all the universe can respond to is lonely. We need to tell it what we want instead of lonely, because that might be one other person to share our life with. It could be a pet. It could mean that we need to go to a club and be with 3,000 people every night. The universe doesn't know what we want until we tell it.
Yeah, I get that. I get
Yeah.
that. But you know, to me, it's like you have to pay attention to your life. And I wrote a piece recently about pay attention to your life. Take care of your life. And that is so, I mean, that's so important. You know, let me give you an example that's probably a lot of people can relate to. And, you know, I've had some success on me. I'll confess this part. You know, I didn't have a strong financial intelligence. And I decided that I didn't like that. So I created a whole program for myself to follow to, you know, build in this financial genius that I wanted to be. And like if I didn't hit the genius part, at least I'd hit what I really wanted. And the first thing on the list was, and I made all this stuff up, so, you know, it just works for me. I don't work for anything else. Look at your bank account every single morning. Every single morning. If you have 10, look at all 10 before you have your coffee. And I was doing that forever. And when I stopped, things started getting a little, you know, like a little funky. So what I'm saying is it takes time and energy and focus to make sure that you're on the track you want to be and stay there. Because if not, you know, little things that sneak in, you know, that you're not expecting or whatever. And I say it like that because I find myself saying to people all the time, it doesn't mean you're a bad person when things don't go the way they should or you think they should. It just means you got to pay attention to your life. And this area that we're talking about right here, this that I didn't want to be, and I suddenly looked and said, there it is. I wasn't paying attention.
Okay,
Just
I'm going to
wasn't.
go back to the bank accounts or the bank balances, and that's one of those circumstances where you had gone through an experience in your life, undoubtedly, where the money was not being managed in a way that was uplifting and harmonious for you, and you came to the conclusion that you wanted to have a specific amount. You wanted those numbers to be telling a story for you. So when you use that for your record keeping, for your touchstone, you need to pay attention to it. Now, there are other people who don't need to pay attention to what's in their bank account. There's a guy who I worked for, owned like a $20 million a year company, and he would, his bank, and this was in the early 2000s, his bank had one of those automated phones where you could call and just dial in and get your bank balance. So he realized that if he called the bank every morning and got the business checking account balance, he would know that all of the payments and all of the income from yesterday had been processed properly. And very sharp guy. I mean, he was an accountant and a CPA in his background, and he built this whole business on a spreadsheet, which was very detailed. But that was the indicator that he needed. And he knew what the number was supposed to be, because he had an idea of what the previous day's sales was, and he had an idea of what the previous day's payments were going to be. So he'd know about what that number should be. And if it was different, then that was his indication. I need to make some more phone calls. I need to look into some stuff because something went sideways.
Exactly the same thing. You know, I mean, except I didn't have $20 million to begin with. But
Oh, he didn't either. The way that the business worked is we were selling postcards, it was like direct mail postcards, and we would print them on Monday and then take them down to the post office and mail them. And the deal that he worked out with the credit card company, it was a company that was in Portland, Oregon, that they would transfer the money after the close of business on the East Coast into the bank account so that he could use the money from today's credit card sales to write the check to the post office tonight. He didn't have $20 million. He was lucky if he could pay the postage.
well, Well, you know what, but the great thing about things like that, again, it's back to paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
There's always a way to work things out, but you have to pay attention to what is to figure it out. And I didn't come up understanding that I was not wealthy. I was raised in a bubble. And in some ways that's nice, and in other ways it is not. You don't know what you don't know. And
Mm-hmm.
if you got any sense at all, when you figure it out, you better figure it out quick because, so when I decided to create my own financial management plan or education plan, I forget what I call it. I keep it on my over here. I knew that you've got to be disciplined and know set it all up the way it works for you.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a whole bunch of financial management things and financial literacy programs out there, and they're just confusing. To me, they were confusing. I said, listen, what works for me? What
Yep.
works for me is to, first of all, know what it ought to look like. Every morning, look at it to make sure that it looks the way you expect. And just a whole bunch of other stuff, little habits that I put in place that seemed like nothing, but it changed everything for me.
Mm-hmm.
But then, when I compare that to what we were talking about in the beginning, when I said I'm exactly what I did not want to be, I, I didn't put any fixes in place to make sure that didn't happen.
Right.
I just thought, I'm not doing that. And
You didn't figure out where you could go and check to see what your current balance was, and it turns
I
out
know.
that you were running a
Yeah.
deficit.
Yeah, yeah,
In whatever
really.
area that is. And this is, by the way, minister speak, by being able to talk about a personal issue without telling anybody what the issue is.
Is that what it is?
Ministers are very good at this.
Okay,
You
yeah,
get into
yeah.
a workshop or an activity, and they can just expound as you have been doing, as we can do, about things and be very open without actually acknowledging or disclosing what the topic is.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't really matter what the topic is because the same
Exactly.
process works everywhere. And it comes down to you need to find a plan that's going to work for you and then work the plan.
Mm-hmm.
So the one that I love using is diets or weight loss programs or weight management programs. I say weight loss because as soon as you think you're going to lose something, there's a lost and found. So, and I have been on the keto diet, and I've been on the Noom diet, and I've been on Weight Watchers, and I've used the Atkins and all sorts of different ones because this has been an issue for me. And almost all of them, when I work them seriously, work and work very effectively. And if my joke is that I've been on Noom for 8 months and all I've lost is 8 months. And and I am working a program and the program is working out, but I need to identify for myself, this is what I want to accomplish. This is the program I'm going to use. And then I got to work the program. And that is the same thing if we're looking for a relationship. We want to have a romantic relationship with someone. Then sitting at home by ourselves on the couch watching TV and eating chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream and lamenting that we don't have a relationship is probably not going to change the circumstance. What we need to do is implement a plan that will actually get us in contact with somebody who may want to have a relationship with us. Yeah.
Yes. You just explained what I didn't know how to explain when we met. I I call it work.
Yeah.
You got to do the work. And I know work sounds, whatever, but I can't find another word for it. And it
Work
also,
is acceptable because, like I said, if it's a workable plan, you got to work the plan. You
and,
got to
and
do
it,
the work.
yeah, and you know what? There's even work in the planning because you may get far enough down and say, well, this one doesn't work for me that well. I mean, I've been on diets forever. And
Yeah.
like you said, they all work. Really,
Mm-hmm.
they do. But with my personality and the way that I do things long term, some of them weren't going to go to distance. Some of them didn't go to distance.
Right.
So I know me. I have to have a disciplined step, that this is what I do. I don't have to think about it. This is what I wrote down. This is what you're going to do, Carol, period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when I do that, it works. I can't massage all these other thoughts and, stuff like that. I can't do it.
And I will put a little asterisk on that because that is the way it works for you.
Yes.
For other people, it'll be different, or it could be different. You still need to do the work, and it's whatever that transformation that gets to happen internally to allow the external change to happen, because whatever it is that we are looking to change in our lives, there's some change that we need to make, or that we get to make, in order to invite that change in, to make room for that change. Otherwise, we're going to go on Weight Watchers, and the only thing that's going to get lighter is our wallet.
Yeah. I've been there too. What are you telling my business? I've been on every one that Oprah puts out there, from the time she rolled all the fat on the stage. But there's a word that you use that to me just works for me. You said pivot, turn away from. And that works for me. Turn away. If I got to turn away from this, then that means I got to turn to something else. I can't just be hanging out there. I got to do it. And the figuring out part, that works for me. Now, there are times when I'll decide don't want to do it. Because, the whole lot of other stuff gets in the way, depression, mild depression, pissed offness, or whatever else. But eventually, you come back and say, wait a minute now, I better go back to the pivot point and see where I left off, because this here ain't working.
Let's take a break, and when we continue, we'll talk some more about looking at the current facts and then being able to pivot.
Yeah.
Are you ready to get results? Now, that's not a rhetorical question. Are you ready to get results? RUR2GR. That's actually the abbreviation for the steps in a practical prayer: recognition, unification, realization, gratitude, and release, with a couple of extra steps in there in case some doubt creeps in along the way. RUR2GR. This class is about the prayer technique that's common to all of the spiritual practices and religions in the most effective prayers that they have. And by effective, I mean that the prayer works. It actually creates a change in the experience of the person doing the prayer. It gets a result. We're going to begin with theory, and then we're going to take it into practice. By the end of the class, you will have your very own practical prayer that will help create transformation in your life.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marchiony.
We're having a wonderful conversation about how I am creating experiences in my life that I don't want. Or as you said before, I'm exactly what I didn't want to be. And that brought us to the pivot. And for anything that we're going to be praying for, or in fact, anything that we're going to be having an experience of in our lives, there's always a pivot available. And it's sort of frightening that we can categorize pretty much everything that we pray for into 5 broad categories: health, wealth, love, work, and spirit. Health is everything about our physical being and our wellness. Wealth is all about our prosperity and the experience of enoughness and sufficiency that we have in our lives. Love is all the relationships, whether it's a romantic relationship or family relationships or community or even our business relationships. Work is about the creativity, the way that we share our gifts. As you speak, it's the work. It's not the job that we go to from 9 to 5 to pay the bills. That has a little bit to do with our creativity and something to do with our wellness and something to do with our prosperity. But the way that we're sharing our gifts and talents and skills and time and abilities, that's our work in the world. And the last one is spirit, which is our spiritual practice and our awareness. And in any of those broadly defined 5 areas, it is possible to be having an experience that's less than optimal, something that's not ringing our bell. In which case, it might be something with our health. I got this boo-boo, or every time I try and stand up, I make more noise than than I want to. Or it could be relationships. About just having a fraught relationship with a family member that just doesn't seem to be getting any better. And we can look at that and we can describe the precise nature of the problem and explain and expand and expound on it And if we do that a lot with lots of different people, it's called gossip and drama. And I know people who are very, very content to talk about the same problem to person after person after person after person. And when they run out of people, they go have one more experience, and there's another drama there. So another story, another tale of woe. And they continue around in the cycle of tales of woe, and then they keep on complaining that, oh, well, this stuff always happens to me. Well, yeah, because who would you be without it? At some point, we get to pivot. What do I want to experience instead? Instead of the drama, instead of the boo-boo, instead of the difficulty with that irritating family member. What do I want to have happen?
Yeah, and that, I think that may be kind of scary, a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, first to know that you can, that you can do it, that there's a pivot point, there's a possible pivot point, and then to decide, what's this going to be like? What is, as a matter of fact, when we were talking last week about something personal, you said, well, you gave me two possibilities. And one possibility I had never thought of. And I thought, that makes sense. Let me sit with that for a minute. And I think that pivot moment is so important, because it's the time when you make the decision as to whether you're going to do it this way or you're going to stay on this road that you've been on.
Yeah. And we don't need to decide exactly how it's going to work. In fact, the less specific we're going to be about what the new situation is, the more latitude we give the universe to create something that will meet our demands and requirements without having to explain how it's going to happen. If you go to your closet and you open it up and everything that's in there is just dissatisfying, this is tired and I don't feel like wearing that, then you can stand in your closet and complain about how unacceptable all of your clothing is, or you can go to the store and say, let me get something new. You do not need to decide while you're standing in the closet what you're going to get when you get to the store. You don't even need to decide which store you're going to go to. The pivot is, I'm going to stop looking at what's been the problem, and I'm going to take a step in a different direction. And then as you go through that, you may know, I'm going to go to Macy's, or I'm going to go to TJ Maxx, or wherever it is that's your go-to place to re-wardrobe. Or maybe it's online. You're going to go shop at your favorite online store. It is the decision to stop doing what you've been doing and do something different that invites in and that makes room for that change and that transformation. That's the pivot.
The pivot is a whole episode. It really is, because it's like understanding for, even if it's just for a nanosecond, that this can be different, and I can put that difference in motion. And for me now, here for control freaks, this is where we really have to put the brakes on, because you say, okay, this can be different, so then I'm going to do this, and this.
Right.
It'll be different. No, because no. And it will be different, but when you want the best difference, when you want the best and highest and, most perfect wardrobe for me, or outfit or whatever, you got to stop for a minute and just bring God or spirit or whatever you choose to call it, and let it have some space. And I found this out too. God doesn't need a whole lot of space and a whole lot of time. Just an acknowledgement is enough, I think, for a spirit to grab and begin to give you hints along the way.
Yep. Yeah, I had a lot of lessons about that come from rock climbing. I spent a lot of time doing a lot of rock climbing, both in the gym indoors and outdoors on cliffs. And the interesting thing about climbing outdoors is that you start climbing up this pretty much blank rock wall, and you get like 10 or 15 feet up, and it's really would be unhealthy to fall. So you can bring a rope with you, and tie the rope from your harness to somebody else's harness, but you need to put in something that's gonna catch you if you fall. So you need to put in some kind of an anchor. And there are these little tiny pieces of hardware that you can slip into a crack in the rock, and then then run the rope through it, and that's more than enough to catch you. Just this little tiny piece. It's not pitons or bolts or anything that you're putting into the rock. It's a little thing that's going to just go in and stay there for a little while, and then you take them out when you leave. But what you need is that little opening that you can put that into. You need a crack. You need a little space where it can go, and then you get the nut or the hex or the anchor piece that's going to fit that, and suddenly it goes from being very dangerous and unacceptable to now we have a method of getting through where we're going to go. And starting the climb and deciding where each of those particular pieces is going to go and what you have to do before you get started is exhausting. People who have climbed the route before know where to put the pieces, but it's possible to go and say, what do I need here? And then address that and continue going and continue going. And then every once in a while you get up the climb partway and there's a tree growing out of the crack in the rock. Well, who planted a tree here? Why would anybody want a tree here? And what happens is there's an opening. And there's enough debris that gets in there, and a seed blows in, and the water gets in, and suddenly it germinates, and now there's a tree growing out the side of a cliff where it didn't belong, where nobody would have intentionally planted it. That's the sort of opening that we need to allow Spirit to have. And it doesn't need to be a huge opening, and it doesn't need to be something where we say this is how it's going to work or this would be appropriate. When there's a possibility, then anything can happen.
So for example, I said, I'm exactly what I do not wish to be, but I know what is the better option. And, I know the better option. So how does that work with the putting the thing in the mountain? Like maybe, how does that work?
Well, I'm exactly what I didn't want to be is an acknowledgement that the program that we've been working so far hasn't been working. And I remember this going back decades, in psychology, when somebody decides, as they're starting their family, well, I want to be exactly like my mom, or if they say, my mom made so many mistakes, I don't want to be anything like my mom. In both cases, the reference point, everything that they're talking about is mom. Even if it's something they're running away from. If that's the only role model, if that's the only example that exists in mind, it's going to come out looking like mom. And even if it's, I want to be exactly like mom, it's like, quantify that. Be very clear, because as you go through, some of the things that mom did might not particularly resonate anymore. So you need to create yourself a new model. Let me change that. You don't need to. It is helpful to create a new model, because otherwise you get to do exactly what you didn't want to do, because that's all that we can do. Because the universe isn't going to give you something that you didn't ask for. It doesn't know no. So it's going to be filling in something. And beyond that, we get to allow the space for the universe to do something different. If we've decided how it's going to happen, then there's no crack in that wall.
Okay. So it's trusting the universe that there are cracks in the wall, right?
It's the crack is in our wall. We need to open up a little bit so that we're not a solid brick wall or a solid stone wall that's going to keep anything new from happening. I need to be open to something new, and I don't know how it's going to happen. As I open myself up to a brand new possibility, it could be a glorious climb. It could be a tree growing where the tree didn't belong. It could be a relationship showing up where there was something really surprising, or spontaneous healing. We've heard so many stories of people who had terminal illnesses and then suddenly they were fine. I love those stories because those are a reminder that the pivot works even when it's something that's, quote, important.
Life is important, though,
Life is important, yeah.
Yeah. So the pivot I think the work, are we saying the work is in recognizing that there is a pivot and making it, but not necessarily what happens after that?
What we're going to do, and the more abstract we can be, the more successful it tends to be. If I'm having an experience now, and I can pivot and say, this is how I want to feel when I'm having a new experience. So I'll use the example of a relationship. So I'm lonely and I really want to have a romantic relationship. And instead of saying I want to go on to this particular app and meet somebody who I'm going to go out with next weekend and then fall madly in love, that's so specific that it may or may not happen. If instead we say, what I want to do is I'm going to stop doing what I've been doing. I'm going to open myself up to something brand new. And the experience that I want to have is to be connected with someone who is loving and supportive, and we have lots in common and love spending time together, and a mutually respectful relationship. And you describe the flavor of it instead of the specifics of it. And then it gets to show up in all manner of different ways.
I like that. Describe the flavor of it.
Describe that. What's this going to feel like when I have it? Not what are the specs of it, so that I can define it, so that I can order it up.
or make it happen and try to orchestrate. Yeah.
Yeah.
I get that.
I had a friend, who wanted to, have he wanted to be involved in a romantic relationship where they would go and get on like the Philly Flash bus and just ride around to the sites, the tourist destinations around Philadelphia, and do those sorts of things. I said, well, do you do that stuff now? And he says, no, I don't have anybody to do it with. I said, go do what you're going to be doing when the person you want to be doing it with is doing it with you, because they're likely to be there too.
Yeah. Yes.
That's the affinity program.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. I'm going to go out to the bars because that's where you meet people. Okay. Do you want to meet somebody who hangs out in bars? No. Well, maybe there's a different choice there.
You know what I'm getting out of this is that the principle works no matter what the situation is.
It does.
Yeah. Yeah. Because sometimes it's just so simple to me, okay, I got that. I'm good, or yeah, I'm all right with that. But then another thing will show up and I'm like, what is going on?
Where'd that come
here?
from?
Yeah. And then you apply the principle again. you know. Okay. So here goes me. I read Ernest Holmes, and then life got busy and I wasn't reading Ernest Holmes that much. And I thought, you know what? Some things that really resonated with you that came through Ernest Holmes, maybe you better just read Ernest Holmes at least on Mondays, rather than rather than forget and then like, oh man, I knew that one time. So yeah, I call it putting fixes in place, but it works. It works.
Yep. It works. Let's take another break, and then we will do a prayer that will focus on perfect pivots.
Hey.
Get inspiration in an instant. God calls are the gentle and uplifting moment of truth to help you remember that the bright light of God's love is shining right now as you.
It's your God Call with Reverend Bill.
Start your 2-week free trial today, and you'll get a phone call 4 times a week from Reverend Bill with an uplifting half-minute message filled with insight, wisdom, story, and fun.
Let your light shine.
You can answer the call to listen to it live or let it go to voicemail so you can hear it later. After the free trial, your subscription is just $5.95 a month. The details are at godcall.org. God calls are disruptive, intentionally.
Whenever you write something, put on a gold star.
They take you away from your routine to remind you about the truth of who you really are. They come at random times between 8:15 a.m. and 6 p.m., so you won't be expecting them. And somehow, the message is exactly what you need to hear at the time.
Magic is loose in the world.
It's a moment of motivation in the middle of your day. Find out more and start your 2-week free trial now at godcall.org.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol and thoroughly enjoying this discussion. Not just enjoying it, but I'm learning.
Yeah. We started out with a really long title, I'm Exactly What I Didn't Want to Be, and we narrowed it down to Pivot, which is a different way of looking at the same thing.
Yeah, but it's like narrowed down to pivot, but that's no small thing. I just want to throw that out there. We said it before.
It is not a small thing.
Not a small thing.
It's a single word, but it's not a small thing. And in fact, that's what our prayer is going to be about today. Our prayer is about the perfect pivot, about being able to look at the situation or the circumstance that we've been involved in up until now and be able to turn away from that instead of anticipating that that's going to be continuing forever and ever and ever, and open up to something different. And it's about looking away from what's been and opening up to something new. And doing that is not always easy, because it's really easy to catalog the problems and the difficulties and the challenges and to complain and to come up with excuses and reasons and rationales of why things have been the way that they are. But the pivot is always possible. So that is the prayer today, not for the results of the pivot happening, but for the awareness of the pivot to come to each of us.
Yes.
Yeah, so we'll do that. And we'll begin by closing our eyes to the circumstances and the situations that have been going on up until now, so we can turn our attention to that infinite creative power, that divine presence, that one that creates everything. We call it nature, we call it the Big Bang, we call it God or Spirit or Sweetie, whatever it is that we call it. It is that one from which everything is flowing. That one divine source that shares itself as and through and in all of its creation. Everything, everywhere, is that divine presence taking its own particular and specific form. That everything includes me, and it includes everyone who is listening to this prayer now. So I know that that infinite intelligence, that divine guidance is available everywhere, and it's available to each of us. And I am claiming now that as we become aware of and put our attention to the circumstance or the situation or the experience which has been unsatisfactory up until now, the things that have been going on in our health and our feelings of wellness and vitality, or in our experiences of financial prosperity or abundance or enoughness anywhere in our lives, or experiences of romance or family or communal love, even with coworkers and people in our neighborhood, even with the government, relationships of any variety. Wherever there has been a challenge, we are aware that that can change. Perhaps it's with our creativity and the ways that we're sharing our work in the world. All of this is subject to change. So the invitation, the intention now, is for an awareness of that situation that has been up until now, being able to resolve differently. What do we want instead? What is that newness that we get to open ourselves up to? Not a specification or a detail of exactly what it's going to look like or how it's going to work, but the flavor, the tone, the feeling of that new experience once it has come upon us. Once we have this newness, how are we going to feel? And we turn our attention, we pivot from what has been to that newness which is available, and open ourselves up to that good, knowing that there is nothing that stands in the way of this transformation. This good, this pivot, this transformation, this awareness is available right now to each of us in our own way. I'm so grateful for it. I'm grateful for the good. I'm grateful for the awareness of the process. I'm grateful for the creative law, which is always saying yes. And I'm grateful to be able to speak this word of openness, of invitation, and release it into that creative law, and to know without any question, doubt, or hesitation that it is already saying yes. This good is already coming about now. So with this deep feeling of thanks, I speak this word, and I release it into that creative law, and I know that it's so. And so it is.
The Practical Prayer Podcast with Reverend Bill Marchiony and Carol Lawrence is a production of BeTheLight.com.
be-the-light.com,
where you can find more information about practical prayer for real results.
Our theme is by Music of Wisdom. You can learn about the spiritual community of New Thought Philadelphia with daily guided meditations,
Weekly celebrations of spirit
and Reverend Bill's classes in practical spirituality
at newthoughtphilly.org.
And that's a wrap.
That was good.
That was fun. That was probably a different conversation than you thought we were going to have when we started.
No.
They always are. Well, see, maybe you start without an expectation. So that's the
Yeah.
openness to which we were referring.
That was really good, because I was doing a whole lot of dissecting as we go. And when you're talking, and I'm always doing that anyway, but sometimes it gets closer to home than and I'm like, chop chop, did you get that? Okay, right. Pay attention. Da, 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 da. And it's really fun. It is. The pivot, because I said that I am exactly what I did not want to be. And I had to tell myself a couple times during the break, wait a minute, don't panic. It's only in this one area, okay? You're not a complete, total mess. That's not what we're talking about here. It's just this particular area that you got to do a pivot.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, all right, done.
Okay.
This is a pivot. Where this is going, who knows? But it ain't where it was. So it's, and I think sometimes you got to get to that point where I can't remember who said this, but we say it a lot. You get sick and tired of being sick and tired,
Mm-hmm.
And you just say, okay, this is going to be something new. And a lot of times that I've done that without having a plan, just like I'm just not doing this anymore. It turns out really good.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's that empowers the pivot, because we let go of our anchoring, our attachment to the way things have been. One of my favorite phrases is "up until now."
I use that. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Yeah, and I didn't make it up, but that's up until now, because all of our stories are up until now. And the principle is not bound by precedent. Thomas Troward said that, and going way, way, way back, and it's true. That means that as soon as you have a new idea, you open to something different, then it's possible for it to happen.
And it's believing that, knowing that, and being okay with it. Sometimes I think it takes a bit of guts to do that.
Yeah, a lot.
But then sometimes when your back is against the wall, guts don't come into it. It's like, look, this is, I'm done with this. I've been there a couple of times in my life, and I'm thinking, that was real easy. Do I have to get pissed before I say this? And I'll end up with, not even end up, what took you so long? You should have changed that situation a long time ago.
Right. Sometimes we can sit there and ponder why situations have not been as comfortable as we want them to be. And other times we know we need to duck right now.
Yes.
There's something coming to my head, duck. Get out of the
Duck.
way.
I guess that's, what the analogy you gave of the piano thing falling down, right? Now that one was scary, because I thought, suppose you're not paying attention and you don't really know, right? Until it's too late. Well, pay attention to your life. There won't be a whole lot of too late moments, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's all good. Thank God we don't live 200 years. Because that would be a disaster. We got enough years to get it right if we pay attention, I think.
My mind is going in so many different directions. If we age half as fast, then 200 years would be okay. But I don't want to have an extra 100 years of being 100 years old.
No.
Yeah.
No.
So on that one, I'm with you. And if you
Okay.
want it to just be a different scale, then you just label half years to be years, and suddenly everybody's living to be 160 or 200. But that's cheating.
All I know.
That's arithmetic.
All I know is I went to sleep at 40. I took a nap and I woke up 60. That's what I say. And I thought, whoa, what in the world happened? Okay, whatever happened before that made you lose all that time, you better pay attention, because you may not have that many years left. And,
Okay.
those are fun things to think about, but time does go by so quickly that you do need to pay attention to your life.
That's true. Now I want to call you Rip Van Lawrence.
Okay.
But I think I won't. All right. Let us wrap up this episode of the Practical Prayer Podcast post-show on New Thought Media Network. And just a reminder again that you can put in a comment at bethelight.com. and we will respond as appropriately from there. Carol, thank you as always.
It was a pleasure, as
And
always.
we are off next week because I will be off in Chicago at the Parliament of the World Religions.
That sounds
But it's
so
possible there will be
exciting.
other fun stuff going on from there because Robert and the crew from New Thought Media Network will be in attendance.
Looking forward to hearing all about it. Although I know there's some pieces that you can catch online, and yeah, I'm all up for.
I'll go see what it's like. It's Chicago in the summertime. It's going to be great. I'll see you.
Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, for your continued support. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown Atlanta, for your monthly contribution. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, for your monthly contribution. And please help us welcome Om Center for Spiritual Living in La Mesa, California. Thank you for your monthly donation. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, for your most generous donation. And a special thanks to Hefferlin Foundation for your generous technology grant. And Suze Ajit, thank you for your very generous donation. And a super special thank you to Dr. Tracy Brown, RSCP. Thanks for being a super donor. And a big shout out to all our committed donors.